Bitcoin in plain English.
Imagine a 9-page document.
Right.
I mean, 9 pages is barely a pamphlet. It's shorter than the instruction manual for, like, a mid-range coffee maker.
Oh, definitely. It's significantly shorter than the end-user license agreement you just blindly scroll past when you update your phone.
Exactly. Now, consider that this extraordinarily brief document was authored by an anonymous entity, someone operating under the pseudonym Satoshi Nakamoto, and it was just quietly published to this obscure cryptography mailing list.
On Halloween, no less. October 31st, 2008.
Yeah, Halloween 2008. Welcome to the deep dive, by the way. Our mission today is to unpack the actual blueprint of what that document created. We're going straight to the source material.
The Bitcoin white paper.
Right, because the contrast between the humility of that origin and the magnitude of its reality today is just staggering. We're looking at a document that didn't just propose some academic theory, but delivered working code that completely re-engineered how human beings conceptualize value.
And transfer it. It's wild to think about. We were recording this in March 2026, and the system birthed by those 9 pages has now been running continuously for over 17 years.
Over 17 years.
Yeah, and it boasts an uptime of over 99.98%.
Which is a metric that completely embarrasses the server infrastructure of Visa, MasterCard, and the Federal Reserve combined.
Oh, absolutely. It secures hundreds of billions of dollars in liquid value across a borderless global network. And the real kicker, it has never been hacked.
Not once at the protocol level.
Never. Which forces us to ask how that is technologically possible, right? Because we are talking about an open source, completely decentralized network operating in a highly adversarial public digital environment.
Yeah, there's no cybersecurity department guarding it.
No corporate headquarters. There is no CEO to subpoena, no central server farm to shut down. The resilience is entirely native to the architecture that was outlined in that initial PDF.
So that's what we are doing today. We're doing a deep dive into that very architecture. We're going to dissect this document chapter by chapter in plain English, examining the cryptography, the economic incentives, and the sheer structural elegance that allowed Satoshi to permanently replace institutional human trust with verifiable math.
And we should definitely clarify right up front for you listening, you do not need a PhD in applied cryptography to understand this.
Thank goodness.
Right. Satoshi's writing is incredibly pragmatic. The genius of the white paper doesn't lie in impenetrable academic jargon. It actually lies in how it seamlessly integrates disparate pre-existing computer science concepts into this flawless, self-sustaining loop.
But before we even open to page 1, I think we have to talk about the environment in which this document was released. Context is everything here. What was the macroeconomic reality of the world when Satoshi decided to hit send on October 31st, 2008?
The timing is probably the most critical piece of meta context we have. Because in the fall of 2008, the global legacy financial system was quite literally tearing itself apart.
Yeah, we were in the absolute darkest depths of the great financial crisis.
Exactly. Just weeks prior, in September, Lehman Brothers, an American financial institution that had survived the Civil War, the Great Depression, 2 world wars, they declared bankruptcy practically overnight.
A 158-year-old institution just gone. And the collapse of Lehman wasn't just a corporate failure, it was a devastating breach of systemic trust.
Because the entire global banking system is built on counterparty risk.
Right. When a titan like Lehman falls, suddenly every bank on earth looks at every other bank and wonders, are you insolvent too?
Credit markets completely froze. The lifeblood of the global economy just stopped pumping.
And the underlying rot was fundamentally a crisis of mediation and trust. Wall Street institutions had packaged these toxic subprime mortgages into complex derivatives, and the trusted ratings agencies, Moody's, Standard & Poor's, they stamped them with AAA ratings.
Everyone trusted everyone else, right down the line. The public trusted the agencies, the regional banks trusted the investment banks, and everyday citizens trusted the regulators.
And every single layer of that trust was betrayed for profit.
It was. And the regulatory response to that betrayal is what truly sets the stage for Bitcoin. Millions of ordinary people were losing their homes, their pensions, their jobs. Yet the institutions that engineered the collapse...
They were deemed too big to fail.
Too big to fail. Governments worldwide intervened with unprecedented capital injections. In the U.S., the TARP program authorized around $700 billion of taxpayer money to bail out the banking sector.
Central banks essentially began the era of quantitative easing. They were creating trillions of dollars out of thin air to plug the massive holes in bank balance sheets.
Meanwhile, the executives who presided over those catastrophic failures largely retained their massive bonuses.
Which is just infuriating.
It laid the systemic moral hazard completely bare. If you take reckless risks and win, you keep the profits. If you take reckless risks and blow up the global economy, the public treasury bails you out.
Diluting the purchasing power of every single citizen in the process.
Exactly, which makes the artifacts Satoshi left in the Genesis block so incredibly profound.
Oh, I love this part. Talk about the Genesis block.
So on January 3rd, 2009, when Satoshi booted up the network and mined the very first block of data, block 0, he hard-coded a specific text string into the hexadecimal data of the block.
It wasn't just a hello world technical note.
Not at all. It was the front-page headline from the British newspaper, The Times, published that exact morning. It read, "The Times, 03 Jan 2009 Chancellor on brink of second bailout for banks."
Man, that's the Rosetta Stone right there for understanding Bitcoin's purpose. It proves this wasn't just some academic exercise in cryptography whipped up in a vacuum.
No, it was a direct ideological response to the inherent fragility and corruption of fiat currency and central banking. Satoshi watched the arbitrary debasement of currency to rescue the architects of the crisis and permanently etched that headline into the immutable foundation of the new system.
A perpetual reminder of why the legacy system needed to be replaced.
Exactly.
Okay, so let's move to the document itself. I want to dissect the title before we even look at the abstract. It's 7 words. Bitcoin, a peer-to-peer electronic cash system.
The density of meaning in those 7 words is incredible.
Let's start with peer-to-peer.
So in network architecture, peer-to-peer means a decentralized communications model where each node has equal status. But in the context of money, it's revolutionary.
Because traditional digital finance operates on a client-server model.
Right. If you want to wire funds to a colleague, you are the client asking your server, which is your bank, to update its ledger. Your bank talks to a clearinghouse, which talks to the colleague's bank, which finally updates their client.
It's you to the bank to another bank to them.
Peer-to-peer eliminates that entire middle tier. It dictates a network where value moves directly from Alice to Bob, with no intermediary institution required to authorize, route, or settle the transaction.
Moving on to the word electronic. Obviously, that places it in the digital realm, living on the internet. But the word cash, that is where the philosophical weight truly lies.
Oh, absolutely. Satoshi didn't title this paper Bitcoin, a peer-to-peer electronic credit network, or a digital settlement layer. The choice of cash speaks to the concept of a bearer instrument.
That distinction between credit and cash is so vital for you to understand. Modern digital money is almost entirely credit.
Think about it. When you check your bank balance on your phone, you aren't looking at money you actually possess. You are looking at an IOU from the bank.
It's just a ledger entry representing the bank's debt to you.
Exactly. Physical cash, however, is a bearer instrument. If I hand you a physical $20 bill, the transaction settles the millisecond. The paper leaves my hand and enters yours.
There is absolute finality.
Total finality. I cannot call a third party 3 days later and initiate a chargeback. Satoshi's objective was to replicate the irreversible, unfreezable, final settlement of physical cash, but teleport it across a global communications network.
And finally, the word system. Satoshi isn't just proposing a new coin or a digital asset. He's proposing the entire comprehensive infrastructure required to issue, validate, secure, and transport that asset.
He engineered the digital gold, the digital vault, the armored transport vehicles, and the assaying equipment, all in a single open source protocol.
All in 9 pages.
All in 9 pages.
So if we open Chapter 1, the introduction, Satoshi immediately identifies the fatal flaw of electronic commerce as it stood in 2008.
He points out that the internet had revolutionized the transfer of information, but it had entirely failed to revolutionize the transfer of value.
Right, because think about buying a book online. It feels simple. It feels like one click. But behind the scenes, it's a massive web of middlemen. You've got Visa, your bank, their bank, maybe currency exchanges.
And Satoshi noted that this entire backbone is heavily reliant on financial institutions serving as trusted third parties. The cost of this mediation is far higher than just the 2 or 3% processing fees skimmed off the top of every transaction.
What's the true cost then?
The true cost is the impossibility of completely non-reversible transactions. Because financial institutions must mediate disputes, they have to retain the ability to reverse transactions.
Chargebacks.
Right. And this reversibility creates a cascading requirement for trust. Merchants have to be wary of their customers, so they demand extensive personal data to protect against fraud.
And then customers must trust merchants to secure that data, which, as we know, inevitably ends up in massive corporate breaches. It creates this massive surveillance apparatus just to buy a cup of coffee. And beyond the privacy loss, there is the existential threat of censorship.
Because if a central intermediary is required to process a transaction, that intermediary possesses the unilateral power to block the transaction, freeze the account, or deplatform the user entirely based on corporate policy or government pressure.
Exactly. Imagine needing a paid security guard to stand between you and a cashier every time you bought coffee with cash, recording your name and having the power to cancel your coffee order. That's what we built digitally.
And Satoshi distills the solution down to a single, devastatingly clear thesis statement in the introduction. He writes, "What is needed is an electronic payment system based on cryptographic proof instead of trust."
Cryptographic proof instead of trust. That sentence is the fulcrum upon which the entire cryptocurrency industry rests.
But proposing a trustless system immediately summons the ghosts that had haunted cryptographers and cypherpunks for 3 decades prior.
If you remove the security guard, if you remove the central bank and the clearinghouse, how do you prevent chaos?
How do you maintain a single version of truth regarding who owns what? That is the problem Satoshi systematically dismantles starting in Chapter 2.
Chapter 2 is titled Transactions. And this chapter is fascinating because it forces a paradigm shift in how we visualize digital money.
It really does. If you ask a layman what a Bitcoin looks like on a hard drive, they probably imagine a secure, encrypted digital file like a highly complex PDF or a heavily guarded MP3.
But Satoshi explicitly redefines the concept. He writes, "We define an electronic coin as a chain of digital signatures."
A chain of digital signatures. It is a radical departure from the concept of digital files. A Bitcoin is not a distinct digital object that you store in a folder. It is purely a historical chain of cryptographic custody.
Like a used car title.
Yes, perfect analogy. Think of a used car title with a perfect, unforgeable history of every owner since 2009. Mr. Kim sold it to Mrs. Park, who sold it to Mr. Lee. You don't verify the car by looking at the metal, you verify the unbroken chain of signatures.
To understand how this works digitally, we have to look at public key cryptography. Without getting lost in the weeds, essentially every user generates a mathematical key pair.
Right, a public key, which acts like an account number anyone can see, and a private key, which is like a highly secure PIN code known only to the owner.
So when you want to transfer a Bitcoin, you take a mathematical hash of the previous transaction, which proves how you got the coin, and you combine it with the public key of the person you are paying.
Then you mathematically sign this new combination using your private key. This creates a cryptographic signature that anyone on the network can independently verify.
They can use the math to definitively prove, yes, the person who holds the private key for this asset authorized its transfer to this new public key.
Exactly. So the coin is just an unbroken ledger of these signatures, stretching all the way back to the moment the coin was originally mined.
But the cryptography guarantees authorization. It fails to solve the most critical vulnerability of digital value.
The mint problem. Because if a central company, a mint, checks the signatures to make sure they're valid, we are just right back to the banking problem we started with.
And even worse, digital signatures verify who is sending the money, but they do absolutely nothing to prevent the sender from sending that exact same digital signature to 2 different people simultaneously.
Ah, the ultimate boss fight of digital money, the double spending problem.
Since digital data is trivial to copy and paste, what prevents me from signing a transaction sending my 1 Bitcoin to a car dealership and simultaneously broadcasting a transaction sending that exact same 1 Bitcoin to an online electronics retailer?
Without a central bank sitting in the middle saying, hold on, your balance is now 0, how does a decentralized network agree on which transaction is valid and which is a fraudulent copy?
Cypherpunks had attempted to solve this for years. Right?
Yeah, projects like DigiCash in the 90s or eGold. But they always fell back on central servers to track the spending. They solved double spending, but they reintroduced the trusted third party.
Meaning they could be shut down by regulators or crippled by poor management. Satoshi's solution to the double spending problem is outlined in Chapter 3, and it is the mechanism that fundamentally changed computer science.
Chapter 3 introduces the timestamp server.
To prevent double spending without a central authority, the entire network needs a way to universally agree on the chronological order of transactions.
If the car dealership transaction happens first, the network can safely reject the electronics retailer transaction as a double spend.
But how do you establish an absolute timeline on a decentralized global network where latency exists, internet connections drop, and malicious nodes might lie about the time they received a transaction?
This is effectively the Byzantine generals problem.
Give us a quick breakdown of that for the listener.
Sure, it's a logical dilemma describing a group of generals laying siege to a city. They must agree on a coordinated plan of action, attack, or retreat. If they attack at the same time, they win. If they are uncoordinated, they are routed.
But they are separated by distance.
Right. Separated by distance, their messengers can be intercepted, and crucially, some of the generals might be traitors actively trying to confuse the loyalists by sending conflicting orders.
So how do the loyal generals reach consensus on the timeline without a central commander?
Satoshi solves this by introducing a decentralized clock. Transactions are mathematically bundled together into a discrete block. This block of data is then cryptographically hashed, run through an algorithm, specifically SHA-256.
Which scrambles the data into a unique, fixed-length string of characters.
And here is the genius of the timestamp server. When the next block of transactions is created, it must include the cryptographic hash of the previous block inside its own data before it gets hashed.
It creates a sequential, unbreakable chain, like a school notebook where every page is numbered and dated.
Yes. Block 43 contains the DNA of block 32. Block 44 contains the DNA of block 43.
So you can't tear out page 42 without everyone noticing the missing link.
Exactly. If a malicious actor tries to go back in time and alter a transaction inside block 42, the hash of block 42 instantly changes. Because block 43 was expecting the old hash, block 43 is now mathematically invalid.
The error cascades through every subsequent block in the chain. The tampering becomes universal obvious to every single participant in the network instantly.
And we should drop a massive reveal here about the terminology.
Oh yes, the linguistic quirk.
The technology we are discussing is universally known today as blockchain. You hear it in corporate boardrooms, government hearings, Super Bowl commercials.
Yet, if you run a text search on the original Bitcoin white paper, the word blockchain yields 0 results.
Not once. It is entirely absent. Satoshi never used the term. He referred to a chain of blocks generated by a timestamp server.
Early Bitcoiners actually refer to it as a time chain, which honestly is a far more accurate descriptor. The technology isn't just about linking data blocks. It is about establishing a decentralized, immutable arrow of time.
It answers who owns what and when did they get it.
So as of March 2026, this notebook has over 880,000 pages, completely unaltered. But wait, if we have this notebook, how do we prevent someone from just printing millions of fake pages and overwhelming the network to rewrite the history?
This brings us to Chapter 4, Proof of Work, the security engine.
Right, because if establishing the truth is just a matter of voting on the longest chain of chronological blocks, an attacker could just stuff the ballot box.
If the network voted on a one IP address, one vote basis, it would be trivial to destroy. An attacker with a modest budget could rent a massive botnet, generate millions of fake IP addresses, outvote the honest nodes, and completely rewrite the time chain to steal funds.
This is a Sybil attack.
Yes, known in computer science as a Sybil attack. Satoshi recognized that to prevent Sybil attacks, the right to vote on the ledger could not be free. It had to bear a tangible, unforgeable cost.
And he found the solution in a concept created by a British cryptographer named Adam Rickus back in 1997, Hashcash.
Let's delve into Hashcash because understanding it is crucial to understanding Bitcoin's thermodynamic anchor. Bakk originally invented Hashcash not as money, but as a mechanism to combat email spam.
The premise is brilliant. Sending 1 million spam emails costs a spammer virtually nothing.
So Bakk proposed a system where, before your computer could send an email, it had to solve a minor cryptographic puzzle. It required your computer's processor to expend a few seconds of energy.
For a normal user sending 10 emails a day, the computational cost was invisible. But for a spammer trying to send 10 million emails, the accumulated electricity and hardware costs would bankrupt them.
Satoshi took Adam Bakk's Hashcash and scaled it up to secure a global financial ledger. To propose a new block of transactions and add it to the time chain, a miner cannot just broadcast the block.
They must run the data through that SHA-256 hashing algorithm repeatedly, adjusting a tiny variable called a nonce, until the resulting hash output happens to begin with a specific number of zeros.
It is a brute force lottery. There is no shortcut, no mathematical trick to finding the right hash. The only way to find a hash with the required number of leading zeros is to expend massive amounts of electricity, powering specialized computer chips that guess trillions of combinations per second.
It's like real gold mining. You can't just say you found gold. Everyone can see the physical hole you dug. It requires unfakeable work.
This transitions the voting mechanism from one IP address, one vote, to one CPU, one vote. Or more accurately today, one ASIC chip, one vote.
You cannot fake real physical energy. To rewrite the Bitcoin ledger, you have to overpower the combined physical energy output of the entire honest network.
And the scale of the security wall in 2026 is almost difficult to conceptualize. The network currently operates at roughly 800 exahashes per second.
800 exahashes.
That means the global network of miners is generating 800 quintillion cryptographic guesses every single second. It is infinitely more power than every supercomputer on Earth combined, dedicated singularly to securing this ledger.
But here's a question. If we have specialized industrial data centers joining the network, wouldn't they just blast through these math puzzles instantly?
Right. If the puzzle stays static and computing power increases exponentially due to Moore's law, the blocks would be solved in milliseconds, completely destabilizing the network.
So how did Satoshi solve that?
With arguably the most elegant piece of engineering in the entire white paper, the difficulty adjustment. The protocol is programmed with a specific target. A new block should be found exactly every 10 minutes.
So every 2016 blocks, which takes roughly 2 weeks, the network autonomously measures how long it took to find those blocks.
Exactly. If an influx of new miners caused the blocks to be solved in 8 minutes on average, the protocol automatically increases the difficulty of the math puzzle. It requires more leading zeros to push the block time back to 10 minutes.
And conversely, if computers leave the network, say a nation bans Bitcoin mining and 40% of the global hash rate drops off overnight, the blocks would temporarily slow down.
But after the 2-week epoch, the protocol automatically lowers the difficulty. The math gets easier, the network heals, and the 10-minute heartbeat resumes.
It is a completely autonomous, self-calibrating homeostatic system. This is why blocks have consistently appeared every 10 minutes for 17 plus years.
It's incredible.
So we have the rules of the puzzle, but how do the computers actually talk to each other to agree on the winner? Let's move to Chapter 5, Network.
The network protocol is surprisingly simple. It's just 6 steps. New transactions are broadcast to all nodes. Each node collects them into a block. Each node works on finding a difficult proof of work for its block.
When a node finds a proof of work, it broadcasts the block to all nodes.
Nodes accept the block only if all transactions in it are valid and not already spent. And finally, nodes express their acceptance of the block by working on creating the next block in the chain, using the hash of the accepted block as the previous hash.
I think of it like a classroom with no teacher, just students who agreed on strict rules. If one student cheats, the rest simply ignore them and move on with the lesson.
That's a great way to picture it. And nodes are everywhere. Basements, corporate offices, even satellites in space. Nobody can shut them all down.
But this engineering relies on a massive underlying assumption. Why are these miners burning millions of dollars in electricity to run these cryptographic lotteries in the first place?
That is Chapter 6. Incentives. Satoshi understood that human greed is a constant. Rather than fighting it, he harnessed it.
Pure economic self-interest.
Yes. The protocol dictates that the first transaction in any newly mined block is a special transaction called the Coinbase. This transaction creates entirely new Bitcoin out of thin air, and it is paid directly to the miner who successfully solved the puzzle.
This is the block reward. Satoshi's own analogy to gold miners. It serves a dual purpose. It incentivizes the massive hardware and energy investment required to secure the network, and it provides a fair, decentralized mechanism to distribute the currency into circulation.
Without a central bank making backroom deals. And this distribution is governed by absolute mathematical scarcity.
Counting cycle.
Yes. The initial block reward in 2009 was 50 Bitcoin per block. But Satoshi programmed a hard-coded disinflationary mechanism. Every 210,000 blocks, roughly 4 years, the reward is cut exactly in half.
As of the recent halving in April 2024, the reward dropped to 3.125 Bitcoin per block.
This asymptotic issuance curve guarantees that there will never be more than 21 million Bitcoin in existence.
The final fraction of a Bitcoin will be mined somewhere around the year 2140.
This creates an entirely new economic paradigm. Fiat currencies are inflationary by design. Central banks constantly expand the supply, stealthily confiscating the purchasing power of the citizens. Bitcoin is disinflationary by design. Its monetary policy is fully transparent and mathematically immutable.
But let's play devil's advocate for the listener here. If the block reward keeps halving and eventually reaches zero, why would miners continue to spend money on electricity to secure the network?
Satoshi thought of the big picture. As the block subsidy diminishes, the economic incentive transitions entirely to transaction fees.
Right, when you broadcast a transaction, you attach a tiny fee.
Miners prioritize transactions with higher fees. In the long term, the cumulative transaction fees per block will provide more than enough revenue to sustain the miners' operations, completely independent of inflation.
This incentive structure also leads to the game theory that protects the network from a 51% attack. Satoshi calculated the economic calculus of a rogue actor who somehow manages to acquire more than half of the global hashing power.
This is where he weaponizes greed. If an attacker controls 51% of the network, they theoretically have the power to rewrite recent transaction history and double spend their own coin.
And Satoshi poses a logical question. If you have amassed that much specialized computing power, which today would cost tens of billions of dollars, what is your most profitable course of action?
You have option A, play by the rules. Use your 51% dominance to mine the majority of the honest blocks, collecting the block rewards and transaction fees, accumulating vast amounts of wealth.
Or, option B, launch an attack, double spend a few transactions to defraud an exchange, and shatter the public's trust in the network.
If you choose option B, the moment the market realizes the network's security is compromised, the fiat exchange value of Bitcoin will plummet towards zero.
And your massive multi-billion-dollar investment in specialized mining hardware, which can literally do nothing else except mine food, Bitcoin becomes instantly worthless. You destroy your own wealth.
The incentives make it inherently more profitable to secure the network than to attack it. Think of a chef whose pay depends on happy customers. The chef could poison the food, but they would destroy their own livelihood.
Exactly. Moving on to chapter 7, 8, and 9. Satoshi shifts from the economic philosophy to the practical realities of scaling the software, because a common critique would be, a permanent ledger of every global transaction will quickly grow to petabytes of data. Normal computers won't be able to store it.
Satoshi anticipated the data bloat and utilized an elegant cryptographic structure called a Merkle tree, detailed in chapter 7.
Named after Ralph Merkle. Let's break down the Merkle tree conceptually.
Essentially, it compresses data like a zip file. Instead of hashing thousands of transactions in a block sequentially into one massive string, the transactions are hashed in pairs. Transaction A and B are hashed together. C and D are hashed together.
Then the hashes of A, B, and C, D are hashed together, forming a tree structure that continuously narrows upward until it produces a single, final cryptographic hash called the Merkle root.
This Merkle root is what gets included in the block header. The brilliance is that it allows nodes to delete the raw data of old, spent transactions from their hard drives to save space, while retaining only the Merkle root.
Because of how the tree is constructed, you can still definitively prove a specific transaction existed in that block without needing to store the entire block's data. Satoshi did the math in 2008. Blocks would only take about 4.2 megabytes per year. He planned for scale from day one.
And this cryptographic compression directly enables Chapter 8, Simplified Payment Verification, or SPV.
Why is SPV so important?
Because you don't need a supercomputer to use Bitcoin on your smartphone. To be a fully sovereign participant, you'd run a full node, which downloads the entire 880,000 block time chain. But you can't realistically do that on a phone.
Right.
SPV allows a user to verify their own incoming payments without downloading the whole thing. An SPV wallet only downloads the table of contents, the block headers.
When it receives a payment, it queries the broader network, using the Merkle branch to mathematically confirm that the transaction is deeply buried under proof of work. It outsources the heavy lifting while keeping certainty.
Now, note Chapter 9 addresses the mechanical structure of the value transfer, which is different from a bank. Bitcoin doesn't use an account balance model. It uses the UTXO model, unspent transaction outputs.
In a bank, the database just says Alice has $5, Bob has $2. When Alice sends Bob $1, the database deducts 1 from Alice and adds 1 to Bob.
Bitcoin is much closer to physical cash denominations. If Alice receives a 2 Bitcoin transaction and a 3 Bitcoin transaction, she doesn't hold a singular balance of 5. She holds 2 distinct, unspent cryptographic chunks of value.
So when Alice wants to buy a coffee for 0.1 Bitcoin, she can't just shave a piece off.
Right. She uses one of her distinct chunks as an input. She unlocks the 2 Bitcoin chunk with her private key, sends more 0.1 Bitcoin to the coffee shop's public key as one output, and simultaneously generates a second output, sending the remaining 1.9 Bitcoin back to a new public key that she controls.
It's like paying with a large bill and getting exact change back, but automated by code.
Ensuring that the total value entering a transaction perfectly equals the total value exiting it.
This mechanism of generating new addresses for change flows perfectly into Chapter 10, which addresses privacy. This is a massive misconception we need to clear up. Is Bitcoin anonymous or fully public?
It is a paradox, really. Contrast traditional banking with Bitcoin. The legacy banking system achieves privacy by hoarding data behind a corporate firewall. The bank knows everything, but the public knows nothing.
Bitcoin inverts this entirely. The entire ledger is radically public. Every single node operator on Earth can see every transaction, every input, every output, and every timestamp stretching back to 2009.
However, the privacy is maintained by keeping the public keys completely decoupled from real-world identities.
It's pseudonymity, not anonymity. Like a public bulletin board in a city square. Everyone sees person #4582 sent 3 tokens to person #7891, but nobody knows who those people are.
Exactly, but it is fragile. If you post your Bitcoin address on a public social media profile or link it to an exchange that required your ID, that pseudonymity collapses.
Which is why Satoshi explicitly advises in the white paper to use a brand new cryptographic key pair for every single transaction you receive.
It isolates the transactions, making it harder for an observer to link a cluster of transactions to a single owner.
We are almost at the end of the white paper, but there is one final math proof Satoshi wanted to leave us with in Chapter 11, calculations.
This is where Satoshi abandons prose and delivers rigorous mathematical proofs. He models the race between the honest network and an attacker trying to pull off a double spend using the classic gambler's ruin problem.
Break down gambler's ruin for us.
Imagine a gambler playing against a casino. What are the mathematical odds of the gambler stringing together an improbable winning streak to break the bank? In Bitcoin's context, the attacker is secretly mining a parallel chain, trying to outpace the honest network to reverse a transaction they already sent.
Satoshi proves that the chance of an attacker reversing a transaction drops exponentially with each new block that is added by the honest nodes.
The math is brutal. Even if a well-funded attacker controls 10% or even 30% of the entire global hash rate, after merely 6 blocks have been mined on top of a transaction, the probability of the attacker successfully reorganizing the chain drops to near zero.
This is exactly why exchanges wait for 6 confirmations about 1 hour. After that, the math says reversing it is virtually impossible.
And let's address a crucial caveat here. What if an attacker manages to seize 51% of the hash rate? Why can't they just rewrite the ledger to steal your coins?
Because proof of work dictates who gets to write the next page. But the cryptographic digital signatures from Chapter 2 dictate what can be written.
Precisely. Even a 51% attacker does not possess your private keys. They cannot forge your digital signature. Therefore, they cannot create a valid transaction spending your funds.
An attacker can only censor new transactions or attempt to reverse their own recent transactions. They cannot print new money or steal your coins. The historical ledger is mathematically untouchable.
Which brings us to Chapter 12, the conclusion. After laying out this unbelievable system, Satoshi's sign-off is almost jarring in its modesty.
It really is. No marketing, no hype, no roadmap, just unstructured simplicity. He simply summarizes. Nodes vote with CPU power, accept valid blocks, and reject invalid ones.
But the true depth is revealed in the final section, the references. Satoshi didn't invent everything from scratch. The 8 citations form a cypherpunk lineage.
He cites Wayday's B-Money from 1998.
He cites the seminal work of Haber and Starnetta from 1991. They literally invented linked timestamping. Satoshi cited their work 3 separate times.
He cited Adam Back's Hashcash for the proof of work and Ralph Merkle for the data compression.
Satoshi's unparalleled genius wasn't inventing a new cryptographic primitive from scratch in isolation. His genius was the combination of these existing ideas into a flawless, self-sustaining loop.
He built a self-sustaining machine out of cypherpunk spare parts. Let's tie all of this together for the listener. What is the bottom line recap?
We started with a 9-page document published on Halloween 2008 during the darkest days of the banking crisis. It proposed replacing human trust with verifiable math.
And here we are, taking a 17-year victory lap. As of March 2026, the time chain is over 880,000 blocks long. No hacks, no downtime, no changes to the core rules.
I strongly encourage you, the listener, to go read the actual PDF at bitcoin.org, bitcoin.pdf. It is surprisingly readable, and it demystifies all the noise.
Before we sign off, I know you have a provocative thought to leave the listener with.
I do. For thousands of years, human civilization has relied entirely on trusting authorities, kings, banks, corporations, governments to keep our records straight.
Right.
If Satoshi Nakamoto's 9 pages definitively proved that we can permanently replace human trust with verifiable math for something as foundational as global money, what other foundational systems of our society are currently relying on flawed human trust, just waiting for their own 9-page white paper to make them obsolete?
That is the paradigm shift to carry with you. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive, and keep exploring the time chain.